Alright, let's start these streams up, test things out. Let me see here. Jump over here. Alright, I'm just testing some things out here. Let's see, Twitch. Alright, yep, that seems good. Alright, got my audio working. And my buddy, a fellow Jen Howard, is going to jump on here in a few minutes. I'm just doing some stream testing. Make sure everything's good. Well, that's not right. All right. Looks like there's 2 people in the Twitch stream right now. Thanks for jumping in. I'm gonna go ahead and post this this link to the GitHub repo that I created for this code review. I don't think it's necessary for anyone to follow along or go to it or anything like that. It's just for reference. Look at that. Oh, now I'm blocking things though. This is an unfortunate user interface. Timeanddate.com. Yeah, do something like that. It's awesome. Look at me planning ahead. Alright, well I'm going to say at the 2-minute mark I'm going to go ahead and do some of the announcements here. So thanks to Team Clinics, we sponsor them all the time because Ryan Bupp is awesome and he did sponsor some of this stuff. So let me move on. Of course, Gin Studios is our our organization, the organization I work for and Howard works for and other software engineers work for. So go ahead and ping me if you have any questions about Gin Studios or working with us or for us or hiring us. OKC Sharp, that's the name of this, the user group that we have named at Techlahoma, so that we can stream these and work with Techlahoma on using their Twitch and doing other things like that. So today's talk is just code review. I have this Twitter Stream API that I'm going to work with, and that I built in just a couple hours as a request, and so I'm just going to go ahead and go over, what I did in that couple hours. Also, we have Kimberly Collins asked me to plug this workshop.techlahoma.org, so let me go ahead and put that inside of the chat here. Workshop.techlahoma.org, put that in the chat. So there's a beginner workshop that comes up. It's on October 22nd, and they need attendees and they need sponsors. And so the idea is this workshop for that Kimberly wants to sponsor. Let me go ahead and just go to it. Bam. So if you go to workshop.techlahoma.org, it's going to redirect you because Techlahoma has set up that redirect from their website automatically to one that Kimberly can control. And so you can come here, you look at all the information. They need sponsors, they have a curriculum, they need participants. They're expecting somewhere between 20 and 30 attendees. So go ahead and jump on here, take a look at it, and plan to join from one perspective or another. All right. So we've got all that going. So I heard Howard join. Welcome, Howard.
Howdy.
Howdy. We're at 11:30. Nice. Okay, so let's go ahead and just jump into this thing going on here. So did you have a chance to look at any of this before jumping on here?
Yeah, I did a quick review over it last night, and then refreshed my memory this morning. So.
Nice. Okay. All right. So yeah, I've got the GitHub here. What?
How long is the stream for?
I anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. I'd be happy with any amount of time, just sort of running over it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I didn't want to get bogged down in a certain discussion if we only have 15 minutes.
Yeah, let's get bogged down. I love getting bogged down. Okay, so we've got this GitHub repo here, and so as it says,
it's just I don't see it.
I'm not sharing my screen to you. Let me go ahead and share it to you. Otherwise, you'd have to be looking at the Twitch stream, wouldn't you?
Okay.
Okay, screen share. There you go. Now you don't have to look at the Twitch stream while we're chatting about things. You got that?
Awesome. Yep, that's good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, so the idea was let's create a Twitter stream, a Twitter stream consumer. So Twitter has this API where they provide 1% of all of the tweets that are going through their system as a sample, a 1% sample, and that 1% sample, anyone of any subscription level as a developer can subscribe to that. So it doesn't cost money or anything like that. So if you wanted to do that, you could just go over to the Twitch, the Twitter developer API and just sign up as a developer, and you'll just get access to it. So a requested sample. So this is a sample of the basic APIs with the 1%, and evaluate that data. So the requirement of this is not just to pull in the 1% and track that 1% sampling, but to provide a way to get, first of all, the count of how many you have processed. So this API that's going to be running is going to be processing all the 1% sampling that comes through, and at some point we want to be able to see how many so far that we've processed. I've decided to do this as an API endpoint, so you can call this API endpoint and get that number. There's other ways that the challenge was configured to as possibilities. Like one is just a console output, constant console output, or something like that. I decided to do this as an API endpoint, and the same thing for this one. So of the processed data that you've received, what are the top 10 hashtags? Was the other part of the challenge. So top 10 hashtags. You just call this get endpoint right here. And that's pretty much the challenge. The challenge is just go ahead and do that, and let's see how it looks. So this is that README documentation. And Howard, what is one of the things that you wanted to chat about first? If you have one that's like early on, or do you want me to start with the beginning of the application? Is there anything that you wanted to chat about, possibly like further in?
Well, so pretty much what I did is I just started from the top there from the Twitter project and moved down. So
Okay.
Was that what you were thinking? Or?
Yeah, let me jump with the program.cs startup first, and then we'll because then we pretty quickly get into the domain project.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Let me.
I didn't know if you wanted to just do top-down project or kind of code flow endpoint types. So yeah, this
Right.
makes more sense.
Yeah, okay, so let's do code flow a little bit, and then we'll get into the domain part. So the way that I started this is pretty much just, with a program with a main in it, and let's configure it. So I got a config file, and I set the config file up with a user secrets, which you can just right click on an API project, or any project that has app settings, really, a startup project, and you say manage user secrets. Oop, you can see part of my key there. Huh, that's hilarious. Anyway, that key's disabled, so it doesn't really matter. So there's this user secrets that gets added to it, and then this user secrets file, whoever has this on their local machine, it'll create you a user secrets file with the same exact GUID, and that way the app settings here will automatically it won't use what's in here, or it'll start with this, but then it'll be overridden by the user secrets that you add into the configuration. So I've set that up so that I could use a secret key, as you halfway saw there. And then I pretty much just, when I started this, I just said the basics, just add Swagger, add controllers, and create builder, add controllers, add Swagger. I hadn't done any sort of composition because I hadn't created the domain stuff yet. And then just the basics, builder.build, HTTPS redirection, map controllers. So all of this stuff pretty much existed right at the beginning. I just pulled it into configure builder and run app to make it more organized. So yeah, that's the beginning of a web API. And so I will, going with the idea of code flow, I will then point out what I did here. Let's go to the composition room. I added a add hosted service, and a hosted service can be, I would say typically, as far as I'm concerned, can be a background running service, a service that just runs in the background the whole time while the application is running. There's some caveats to that, but I added a hosted service which I named Twitter Stream Service, which, as you can see, is a Microsoft extension hosting background service. And all that does is it forces you to override this this base class forces you to override this method. And so what I've done here is this is the place where I've done the front boundary work of the service just hitting this API endpoint and reading the stream. I have this process here. Response. It will consider it a complete request after the response headers are read. So that means it's not a complete request after all of the content comes through and the whole request is done and pulled into local memory and everything like that. Just when the response headers come back, that way we can connect to the stream, the content stream, and be pulling that as it goes. That means that this reader, which is reading the response content, this reader will just continue reading that stream of data as long as it keeps coming, which in the case of a constant connection to a stream like this, it's going to be indefinitely. It's just going to keep coming and coming and coming and coming. So I've got the stream. This while reader.endOfStream is false, I'm going to be calling reader.readLine. And the way that Twitter sets it up is that for each line is a tweet. So I deserialize the tweet, which is just basic code that you'd expect to deserialize things inside of a try-catch, so that if it doesn't deserialize correctly, it'll fly out, essentially. We've got some logging in here. So that's one of the things that are part of my code base that could be reviewed, is how I'm using logging. I've got my HTTP client. It's being injected so that in this case, it's just a singleton, so it doesn't really matter. But you inject HTTP client so that you can override the handlers or make sure that you don't get port exhaustion. And then I've got the tweet service. So as this is looping through each one of those tweets, that's where we get into the part where Howard may have a question of the tweet service in the domain. So the tweet service has this main method right here, which is called process tweet. And I'm going to let you go from here, Howard, to let me know what you think about anything going on in this class at all.
Okay, can I go back to the service?
The stream service?
Yeah. The line 29, that API in Twitter, probably a good idea to pull that out into a setting.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good point. And some of the stuff I'm actually going to end up doing for a V2 of this. So yeah, I'm gonna take note of some of these things. Some of the things I might do in place, but I don't want to pull out into a setting immediately right now. But I will do that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, especially for the first iteration.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I was like, ooh, that's gonna come back, especially when they change the URL. Whatever.
Yeah, half the time when they change the URL, it's just because they go to a V3. Everything else should still work just the same. Like this stuff will still work, and so in that case, you want to be able to change this. The other half of the time, if they change this, you're going to be coming in here anyway to be changing these DTO models and stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's good, because that one half of the time, if it is that simple, I do just want to configure this inside of like app settings or something like that.
Yeah, if they change that from a 2 to a 3 and everything else works, you hate to have to push code just to update that literally single character. But yeah. All right, yeah. So let's go back to where the process tweet section is. So I want to say that in the README, that README is actually longer for an initial README than some of the projects on GitHub that have been out there for like 10 years.
Oh yeah.
So that's that's awesome to, because I don't know about you, but sometimes you're looking for a piece of code, you're looking for a project, you don't want to spin one up, does someone else do one that's even, halfway there, 90% there, hopefully. But they don't have a README. They don't have a document that says this is why I created it. This is what it does. And so then you have to do an extensive code review. Maybe they name stuff weird. Maybe it does do what you want, but you don't know until you pull it down and try to run it, and then you find out
Yeah.
it's not
Just to find out what's happening in general. What does this?
Yeah,
What does this
exactly.
repo even do?
Yeah, because if if you wanted, I mean, obviously this thing's called Twitter, but if you wanted, Twitch streaming, hey, theoretically, this is probably 80% close to pulling Facebook posts. You know what I mean? Like the idea is real similar. So
yeah.
So with that idea, you mentioned a lot of resources in the README about functional core type stuff, and I was wondering. I hate partial classes. You already know that, but and the main reason I hate them is because if you see in some log that you have an error on line 20, you come here and wow, this method isn't even close to what
there's not even a line 20
says.
in here.
Exactly, yeah, or the other way around, right? So it's like, so your first thought, or my first thought anyway, is, oh, my version, my master is not what is deployed on the server. So then you have to go run that down and discover that no, it's the right version. There just happens to be two classes, two files that are called tweetservice.cs.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some alternatives there. I don't like the folder name logic either. Since you mentioned functional core in your README, I kind of was thinking maybe instead of logic, functional core would be a better name. And then whenever you actually called out the tweet service, update the namespace accordingly. So it'd be line 20 here. It'd be functional core, or functional core dot tweet service dot get valid hashtags. Again, just suggestions. A lot of times in code reviews, you get suggestions that the owner of the code, the person, is like, yeah, no, I'm gonna leave it partial because it's semantics and nobody cares except you. So, but
there's a couple things to note on that. The reason why I do something like this is because what did I just rename that to? It's still tweet service. It's just functional core. So this would still work exactly the same.
Everything's fine.
So this is an annoying thing to me because it's always going to be they're directly related. Like this class and this class are directly related, but this isn't that big of a deal. So I think it'd be a preference of, do you want to do it like this way where you then have to specify this, and you're pointing out things that are good reasons to do it this way, because then you're going to have possibly even I don't know, whatever we end up calling it. Because then that's inside of you'd be able to see more specifically. Granted, in the error logic, even if they were named the same thing, it would have a path with the word logic in it or whatever the case is. But
if the namespace, it has the namespace, and how you had it, the namespace didn't have the word logic on it, so.
Yeah, and you can't do partial classes in different namespaces.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, for sure. But just as far as the logging goes, I don't think your first thing wouldn't be, I bet it says logic folder. Unless all your code has a logic folder, and then everyone should just know it's not here. It's there. Boom, done.
All right.
Yeah. Again, just kind of a discussion. I do like having those discussions as a code review during the code review as a team. I think that is a much better place to have it than at the PR side. I know a lot of people use PRs for code reviews, but I feel like PRs, the point of a PR is to verify nothing is egregious, nothing's going to break, you're not introducing any security vulnerabilities, you're not breaking patterns. these kinds of things really shouldn't hold up a PR, but as a team, you should be on the same page.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, like I said, that comes down to some preference, and I think
Yeah,
I'd be
absolutely.
perfectly happy if a company said we don't want to use partial classes because it hurts our debugging. If that was their case, I don't need to make cases against why I like partial classes during a code review. Except this isn't just a code review; it's also video. So I'll say on the other side, the reason why I like partial classes isn't just so that you can directly call methods that are in the same class without having the extended FQDN or whatever the case is because uh, it really does show that these are the same thing. They're the same code because it was before I did this. It was like this,
Yeah,
and this makes perfect sense. For like this is a perfectly good class. So going from that to it being a partial class is just sort of logical to me.
it's absolutely semantics. Yeah,
Semantics, yeah. So, but I'm happy with either way of it happening, whichever way a team would decide whether they like that or not, or what they want the naming conventions to be. I'd, I'd go either direction.
but absolutely, what I couldn't handle is some of them are named functional core, some of them are partial, some of them have logic at the end, some of them have, you know
Oh
what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
pick
That'd be
away,
annoying.
pick away, because you're gonna get in some trouble if there's not some kind of consistency in name.
I agree.
So
I agree. Always
yeah,
pick away. I
that's
mean, there's so many things in coding that are
mhm.
based on preference and pick away.
Yeah, that was the main thing on this class. I do want to ask you. I know the answer, but I want to ask you why. So on line 30, you have the get top hashtags. You have that truncated view. How come you didn't do that for the instructor?
I have this method right here, and what was the question?
So the what do they call that? The single line.
Yeah, the single line lambda method of doing it.
Yeah, yeah. So how come you didn't have that syntax for the instructor as well? Because it's
I don't think constructors can do that. I'm pretty sure constructors can't use the lambda
oh,
methodology.
oh man,
Oh, they
that's a really
can.
good answer. Not what I
Yeah,
was
well, that would have
expecting.
been a great answer, except I just learned
That's funny.
something. Okay.
Uh, I thought the answer was going to be because you want to make it easy to do dependency injection for the next time. But
Let's see this. String some setting, and then I do this. Assign field. Oh, look, it automatically expands it out. That's pretty cool.
oh,
Well,
yeah, I'm
so
sold.
that wouldn't be a
Yeah.
good reason either. Okay. I just learned something. I do like to stick with that pattern that if you're doing something simple and you're really trying to communicate, hey, this method's doing like pretty much nothing. It's got like one little thing.
Yeah,
Then doing this
it's not
really
going to work next
showcases
time.
that. Yeah. Um,
I'm
so
curious
so
about let's say the repo is null. It should never happen. But what would the line number be? Would it be 31 or would it be 30? I know, like
ooh,
currently you have this 31, but when it compiles, I think it puts them on the same line.
right. Yeah, I don't know. That'd be something to
You
look
know,
into. It's not going to
either
happen
way.
here. Here you can do some sort of design by contract where you say if repo equals null, throw new null except whatever. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have to do that here because of get required service. So what was that? That was the tweet service. So the tweet service has get required service. So this, instead of just get
Mm-hmm.
service, will
Nice.
say if they
If they can't
haven't,
find it,
yeah, if we haven't done this part right here and registered it, then this will throw an exception. Hey, that was a required thing to be injected here. So that is handled automatically. But otherwise, if you don't have
I
that
like that.
or you can't have that, then yeah, definitely have design by contract stuff up there.
Okay.
Not to say that you shouldn't be checking for nulls in a lot of cases or have the design by
Yeah,
contract because once you get a really complex system or something, which hopefully you don't, hopefully you have microservices instead of a monolith, but if you start getting really complex stuff and people just start instantiating this class in multiple places throughout the code base, who knows how they're going to be doing it. So maybe double check. But in my code bases, you better not be instantiating in class except through dependency injection, proper dependency injection. So anyway, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know where this would show up on the line if that was null. I don't know which line number it would say. I assume 31 though.
Yeah. Either way, it's easy to get there.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that was the main thing I wanted to talk about on this one.
All right. So backtracking to this, for each one of these lines that come in from Twitter, we'll say after it gets through, it's definitely a line. It was deserialized. I do have a pattern here that Howard wouldn't even touch on because he knows it already because we use maybe monads all the time. But I do have other videos where I talk about the maybe monad and how that works. This one, since in this project I didn't want to include third-party NuGets, I just wanted to do this like here's a simple all-inclusive project. I did put a super basic maybe monad in here. So I mean, feel free to copy this type of pattern. I just did this for each one. In one case I needed a none with just a reason, and then I'm like, oh, I need another none that has an exception, so then I added an exception, and so I just sort of built this as needed, ad hoc. But the general pattern is you can, instead of returning null or throwing an exception, I return maybe dot none with a reasoning here. And then the thing that receives this can decide, well, if it comes back with a value, here's the thing where it processes if it comes back with a value. If it doesn't have a value, this is the thing. But even before that, if it has an exception in it, then this is what I want to do. So you can make those decisions by the consumer instead of returning null or throwing an exception and then having to have a try catch in the consumer. But you can watch our other videos on the maybe monad.
Yeah.
But anyway, we get into
the
this.
value there is huge. As I said, the value on the maybe monad, well, a monad in general, but maybe monad, you always return something, right? So you write some JavaScript that calls this, that displays it on some web page somewhere. You always have something, at least a message to say, no results, right? Because what does null really mean? Was there an error? Did you get no results? Did it work, right? So
yeah,
it's the value is just huge, knowing that you're going to get something back every time, something, just one thing that you can tell the user it worked, it didn't work, whatever. So it's great. Definitely go watch that if you haven't yet.
Yeah. Rainer points out this is technically not a lambda. I know that this is the lambda operator or whatever. I know that this is not a lambda expression. But Rainer, go ahead. Feel free to throw in there. I know I could Google it in like 1 second, but feel free to throw in there what this was called. Is this called single line statement, or I forget. I know there's a term for that. And I'll also point out that Kimberly said in the chat the idea of separating out PRs from code reviews. She likes that. That's definitely something that I know you brought up, but something that I also stick to. I'm calling you out on it, Rainer. So yeah, definitely something I stick to, that the PRs are, they're a gate. A PR is a gate that helps get code through from the developer into the next environment inside of a CI/CD, really fast-moving scenario. But the code review, that should be happening while the developer is coding, after the developer's, a week later, after it's already in master. Code review should constantly be happening where you're going in and making sure people are following patterns. Now, the architect or whoever's doing the PRs, if you're egregiously breaking a pattern or something like that, then obviously, like Howard said, if it's something serious, they're going to call you out on it. It's not purely security related and functionally related, but if there is something egregious in there, they should call you out on it and not let it through. There's a whole lot of things you check for in a PR, and there's so many things to check for in a PR that are unrelated to like code review, like what we're going over right now. So yeah, Kimberly. Expression-bodied member. Okay, yes. Instead of having the full body and aroma of what you're used to, this is an expression-bodied member. Awesome, thanks, Kimberly.
Yeah, expression body versus block body.
Block body, yeah. Okay. All right, cool. So yeah, Howard and I have gotten us all the way up through this point. Now, for this process, it was not required and even possibly ill-advised to try to use databases and make this overly complex with like a full infrastructure, server infrastructure, of a system. So what I did is do some in-memory stuff here. So of course, in order to protect against deadlocks, I'm using a concurrent dictionary, and for this integer here, it may be overkill, but I'm using the interlock.increment methodology. So what it does is it passes in a field or a variable, and it will increment this with its own lock. It's a lot lighter of a lock than just doing a full lock yourself. But yeah, it does the lock, it increments it, and then unlocks it. So we've got this to be thread safe, and we've got the top hashtag stuff to be thread safe. The weird thing that I would point out here, linters. Oh, I love the idea of linters, Nicky Jones. I love the idea of linters. I am technically using a linter, you might say, for all of these in a way, because I'm saying treat warning as errors. So anything that's adding coding rules that will give you more messages, more warnings, things like that is great. A lot of people, since they don't have this in here, you just start seeing projects with warnings just building up, and warnings and messages just sort of building up like crazy down here, and they don't care because it compiles and there's no errors, whatever the case is. So definitely turn on this, and then with linters or with extra rules that you want to put into Visual Studio, it'll start to enforce more of those things, and you will enforce them with this. You treat warnings as errors is definitely something that every developer should be doing. So the weird thing that I point out for myself here, which is only because I'm not using a database, is that for the entity, which is the thing that's going to go into the database, and it's controlled by the data core project. The entity is controlled by the data core. So this has its own rules. It's a lot like a DTO, because it really is a DTO that comes from the domain and then through our data process, and then into a database. So this is the back boundary DTO, you might call it, an entity. Is that the hashtags field that would be in a column or whatever the case is wouldn't be able to be a list. It would just have to be a string, a serialized string or something like that. Some sort of a blob field that will hold the hashtags for this tweet. So I serialize it whenever I DTO this in the domain, in this domain project. Whenever I DTO it from a tweet model into a tweet entity, I serialize this. And then that looks weird because right when I get over to here, I deserialize it back into a list of string. So I don't think that this is a red flag if people know what I'm doing. It's like, okay, yeah, I know why he's doing that. But in case people wouldn't know what I'm doing that because this is only happening because of the way that I'm doing this. If I were to be saving this using Dapper or any framework or whatever the case is, just SQL ADO, sticking this into a database, I would just be sticking that string directly into a database. But since I'm doing it here like this, and I'm doing this into a concurrent dictionary so that later on I can get the hashtags out and sort them and do whatever logic, I then deserialize it. So it looks weird that I'm serializing it first and then deserializing it, but that is what's happening. So I get those hashtags out of the tweet, and then for each hashtag, what I'm doing is I'm sticking it in here as the string, and then I'm incrementing the count by 1. That way, whenever I say come get hashtags, I order by descending on that value. I take the first 10, and I just select that key out of there. And there we go. Let me just go ahead and just run it.
Can you explain that? Why is that exclamation points at the end there of that deserialized state?
Yeah, this. So tweet.hashtags is coming in from an object that is controlled by me. Let me go back over here. Hashtags. Let me go over here. So I've got content here, and I've got hashtags, get valid hashtags, and that's this logic right here. And this logic does not return a nullable list of string. This object returns a list of string because there will always be input text from the content. Every tweet will have content, even if it's an empty string or a single character, whatever the case is. And so this regex.matches is going to always pull back a list of matches of what a hashtag is, even if that list is empty. So it's not going to be null, because otherwise this would have a question mark on it. It will never be null. It will always be something on there. And so since these hashtags will never be null, and then I serialize them, this hashtag thing here will never be null. So then I come into here, and I'm saying I'm deserializing this into a list of string, and I know that this will never return null. So I stick this on here, because if I didn't have this on here, then it's like, oh, hey, this may be null. You may need to be careful. In which case I could say, of course, if hashtags equals null. Oops. I would never say really do this. I'm just showing you how if it's null, then it gets handled, or whatever the case is. Or I could say hashtags equals a new list of string. Then it handles it as not being null. So I like to, a lot of times, not use these. I like to never use these, except that deserialize just happens to always return a nullable t value. So if you know that the deserialize will never return null, because this is definitely going to have a value, it's going to deserialize into either just an empty list or whatever the case is, then there you go. It's safe to use this. You bring up a good point, though. Maybe it's a good standard that when you use this, which should be rare, you maybe say I don't know, something like that. You should put a comment on there, because this should be rare enough that it may be valid to put a comment about something on there. All right, what have we got here? So when I started up, I set it up to automatically go to Swagger so that people can obviously see what the API is. And so that way you don't have to type /API/count up here if you don't want to. Ooh, what did I do? So if I click try it out, execute. So I execute it, it returns. So far since running, which was just a couple minutes ago, I started running it, it's done 10,000. And then if I keep clicking execute, you can see that the number keeps going up and how many it's processed. So yeah, it's definitely processing a lot. And then if I say come in here to top hashtags, try it out, execute, it'll return the top hashtags. Dream face. I actually watched the dream face reveal pretty close to live last night, which shows how much of a Minecraft nerd I am. So you can see what the top hashtags are on here on Twitter. This is only based on the 1% that stream that I'm receiving. So this isn't the true top 10 of the last 3 minutes, but you know, based on a 1% feed, it's pretty close. So yeah, that's how it works. Nick Jones said, "What are my thoughts on declaring types instead of using var?" I had this argument so frequently.
Yeah, with Nick.
With Nick. There's some new functionality which is really cool. Is that if you declare the type now, you no longer have to double declare it. What annoyed me the most was having to do this. Like, why am I declaring it whenever it's right here? Why am I double declaring it? So that was one of my big arguments. So now that argument's gone, as of .NET 6 or whatever. I don't know, the C# 9 maybe. I'm not sure. So yeah, that argument's gone. But at the same time, I can see, like for this example, I can see what it is right here. For this example, I know that it's a set of valid hashtags. I don't need to know that this is a list of string or a nullable list of string, or whatever the case is. And a lot of times, like this right here, repo.addTweet, even if I said like, oh no, that doesn't return anything. I don't think I have any good examples in here, but it just seems so redundant to have to put the type here in just about every case whenever your code is self-documenting. Of course, that's a big caveat. Whenever your code is self-documenting, some people write code in such a way that it's not even readable. So of course you're going to want to put some stuff on here. I've considered changing my personal methodology to flip this. Instead of using var, get rid of all the news over here. But as I started doing that, not everything can follow this pattern. Some things can't follow this. So I ended up just leaving it as it is. So yeah, there's an argument to be made for that, Nick. But yeah, I don't want to make this whole talk all about that. I'm just gonna say that is now valid in my mind, whereas before it was not valid. But now with the new change, that is something that I would consider valid. And as Philip says, oh look, I can put my mouse over it. But also, as Nick is pointing out, in a PR, you're not inside of the IDE, and so you can't really put your mouse over things. But then I go back to your code should be readable, and if the PR approver is saying, I don't even know what that type is, like I couldn't even imagine what's returned here. Is it a person? Is it, what could be returned here? I'd say that the PR approver should say you need to make your code more self-documenting, something like that. Yeah, Nick. Next time you need to be on the stream so that we can hear you complaining to me. Yeah. So, what other thoughts do you have, Howard? Oops, I didn't mean to click on
that. The DTO objects in I think it's a tweet DTO.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on that one. The actual DTO. Yeah, just what the hell? Why? So you're getting this from Twitter, and
Twitter has this.
Man, this is ugly. Edit _history_tweet _IDs.
Yeah, that's what deserializes from their JSON. I don't have much control. And of course, I could put attributes on here.
You have absolute control. Oh, dude. You have absolute control over this. You have absolute control over this.
Over their JSON?
Yeah, put the JSON attributes on here. Name equals ID and give it a proper C# so it doesn't look like nasty JavaScript. Good.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, is that I'm not a fan of attributes on models a lot of the time. Now with the new built-in system.json, I'm once again the later stuff over the last year or two have changed a lot of my arguments, which is really good because I like that C# is improving. I didn't like inside of any of my core projects or inside of my projects where I had models or entities or whatever the case is, to have to add a NuGet package for Newtonsoft so that I can put on these serialization attributes and stuff like that.
Yeah, no,
I got into the habit of saying this. Just make the DTO as they want it, because either way, whenever it comes in on the front boundary, I'm going to have to convert it from. It would still be a DTO of some sort. I'd have to convert it from this into the actual core model how I want it, which is like this. So since I have to convert it anyway, I didn't mind leaving this looking ugly and dirty with their following their contract. But you're right. Now that system.json is built into everything, adding those would be I have less of an argument against it, I guess you could say. And then not only that, but now I have to put this thing up here saying, I know that I'm not following the naming conventions and I have lower.
Yeah, that was the next thing. That's
again,
another.
I don't mind the front boundary DTOs being ugly based on the contract. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I don't want to see the nomenclature or the naming patterns. I want to see it consistent throughout the project. And I get that. Now I will say this: if as far as adding the attributes, if you control the object, whether that's coming from another one of your microservices or whatever, there's absolutely no reason for you to put attributes here. name it right on the other side. That's not this case, but you're just dealing with what Twitter's giving you. So
Yeah, exactly. And then in that case, if you're controlling it and it's from another microservice you own, or even something that's online that has an SDK, if you're consuming the SDK of the one that you own, then you're just directly using their models as the DTO models. So then the name is exactly the same, and then that's perfect.
yeah. So
yeah. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It comes in. It's controlled by a background process. All the data comes in through the background process, which is constantly running and constantly reading that stream. The background process uses the process tweet on the domain to process the tweet and send it to the repo. The repo just stores it inside of some memory, stores it in memory, some thread safe memory as much as possible there, and then also exposes the ideas to pull that data out from the static memory. That's pretty much the whole thing. This project organization is part of what I call separational concerns, which I talk about inside of the README. That doing it like this means that you can see core stuff, which are the interfaces and the models and things like that. They shouldn't be referencing other things, and you can see that by looking at this project. The data project references nothing other than its core, and the data core project, of course, references nothing. And being able to look at these things and seeing what they reference and how they work differently shows you that they have different concerns. The API, of course, references everything. I didn't need this. I didn't need to reference the core directly because it's referenced through the domain. The domain references its own core, so I didn't need that technically. Yeah, so you can see the project structure and you can see the different concerns based on, front boundary, domain, back boundary. And you got core projects, then you've got an SDK in here, documentation. We don't talk about documentation that much because I am a 100% code should be self-documenting, except that this built a NuGet package, which is an SDK, which other people are going to be using. So they can't really see what's going on or what this is supposed to be doing. So I add documentation to a NuGet build for that case. If it ends up saying exactly the same thing, that's pretty much worthless. But if it ends up having good information, top 10 hashtags, it's using the GenStudios Twitter API, whatever the case is, it's good information. It's good to have documentation on there. So yeah. Some people might ask, why don't you have documentation on all of your methods and all of your properties and everything? Well, it's because it doesn't need it, but this does need it, in my humble opinion. I'm doing my own PR here, my own code review. All right, so your things plus my things plus Nick and Philip and Kimberly and Rainer Sigwald. Then yeah, we're good. Anyone else got any more questions?
I had one thing about the tests. I think on if you go to the actual test, this kind of brings home the point that you're not spinning up a new tweet service. You're using just the functional core that the tweet service uses.
Right. Yeah. So if I go to this thing, you can see that what I'm testing is the functional core stuff. So anything that could be made as a static method. In anything that could be made functional core. So this is all mostly procedural stuff. This is definitely procedural. I'm making a call. I'm doing a data transformation. I'm calling a thing. I'm just calling a thing. This is all just procedural stuff, procedural shell. And then the functional core, which is, what's this thing? This is weird. Oh, there's a thing in here that's doing some definite functionality. I mean, regex is definitely a lot of stuff going on inside of regex, even with a simple thing. Or conditional transformations or loops or whatever the case. All that stuff should be inside of the functional core. I'm just saying the same thing you said, but in longer methods. And that stuff is what gets tested by unit tests. Unit tests test that the business rules, the business logic, all that exists in the functional core portion of the code. Yeah. And I didn't invent these, but I Googled around a lot for what proper hashtag validation is. And so for each one of these, they should produce one hashtag, like this right here. This is not a hashtag because it has a space between it. This is a hashtag, and plus it has data after it, but it stops at the space and like all that sort of stuff. Different languages, different car sets, stuff like that. I just wanted to make sure that it all works. So definitely needed to unit test that functionality there.
Yeah. This particular test is really great. However, it's only testing a single or none.
Oh yeah.
So
that's
the
true.
name of the name of the test is get valid hashtags, plural, but all the tests are single hashtags.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So
I should probably make more tests for multiple.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's the kind of thing that I feel it should have been in a real world scenario caught by a PR, because obviously you're checking for the null, the empty case, and the single case. But what about the multiple case, right? Make sure your regex actually works for multiple hashtags.
Yeah.
And obviously it does because you test code, but
I'm gonna put that on my list of things to add to here. And whenever I originally did this, it was just picking out a hashtag, and then I changed the method to do multiple to get multiple out of a string, and so it was regex.matched. Then I changed it to regex.matches, and so it just renamed it essentially. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good point that now that it's
which is great, right? Because now that you had the one test, the PR reviewer would be like, hey, it says it's returning many, but you're only testing the single, and then you can explain, well, I added functionality. Great, that's a primo use case for a new test case.
Yes.
Awesome.
You know what? Since we have a couple minutes, I could just put one in here. Hashtag. Starting hashtag. So hashtag. I wonder if I can make this a list.
Leave it params. Okay. That's better.
Yeah, it's not gonna work.
Can you do params here? Params a string.
Oh, of course it needs to be.
No. Oh.
Oh, it's got the same name, duh.
That's the you are.
All right. So if I were to say that, and then say, here's the input, the valid hashtags. I'm not gonna do any of the failure ones. Expected. So.
You want to check count?
Contains. Exception. All right. I wonder if this will work. Run. It works. And what if I just happen to write a failing test first? I should have done this first. Run. Yeah, of course it doesn't have that in it. Cool. So yeah, now I've got that going. I mean, this is pretty good, but of course I'd want to put more on here. I don't want to do that all live right now either, but yeah, there you go.
Probably want to check the count too. The count of expecteds.
I think it does that implicitly because I've got 2 in there. It'll do both of them. Oh yeah, because if it might have more.
Yes, yeah.
Ooh, that's a good
Yeah.
call. Expected count, and then
Raise.
Renal. We did it. Oh my god.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to go over some of those other points that we went over and make sure I've got everything else in there and check this in for my challenge.
Sweet.
Good stuff. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream, but also I'm going to invite anyone in to chit chat if they want to. So let me go ahead and pull up that invite. That's not right. So feel free to jump in here and join. Bam. And we'll see you guys next time.